Welcome to Film School Dropout. I am your host, Ben Friedman, and today we're nearing the end of this series. We are getting into the 2010s, and we're kickstarting the 2010s in the year 2010 with Shutter Island, a very genre-heavy film for Martin Scorsese, a film that I had never actually seen before recording this episode. I watched it right before recording. My guest today is Spencer Roth-Rose. He's a very funny writer. You can find some of his pieces on The Onion. He is also doing comedy writing. He has this incredibly funny podcast called Blackout Dates. I covered it a few years ago for the magazine. That's how we kind of built we became familiar with each other, I should say. And I just always enjoy having him on my show. He was on the previous iteration of my podcast talking about the movie Top Gun. That's one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded. I think that hour and 40 that we talked Top Gun is super funny. And he brings the heat again this time. This is a movie Spencer was very high on. He had a lot of fun with. And I just enjoyed this movie as well, getting to talk about it and just kind of exploring the twists and turns that is Shutter Island. So without further ado, thank you all for watching this episode and welcome to Shutter Island. All right, we are back today. My guest is writer, filmmaker, occasional podcaster, friend of the show. I've had him on previously for my Top Gun episode right before Top Gun Maverick. It's Spencer Roth-Rose. Spencer, how are you doing today?
Why you all wet, baby? I was planning that one for a while. That one in the back pocket. I'm good.
You've had that just ready to go.
That's sort of my go-to response whenever anyone asks me how I'm doing. It works actually really well for this show, less so outside of the show.
Yeah, no, it works really well for this episode. I don't know how that would get responded to just like on the streets. Like if you're just
generally not as positively.
Yeah, I feel like that could be problematic in today. But so anyway, you're joining me for my Scorsese series, which at this point, I've been recording this. We are recording today, Thursday, August 17th, 4:50 p.m. And up until this point, I've recorded probably more than half of the series, and I didn't have a name for this series. I kind of just kept calling it Scorsese September. I didn't really come up with a name. Spencer, I'm really honored you're on the show. I'm going to announce the name of this podcast officially.
Ooh,
well, I guess everyone else has heard it by now, but you're the only one of my guests who has actually heard the name.
What an honor. All right, hit me.
It is the Movie Museum. We are talking about Hollywood wasn't made in one day. It's the idea of who gets in the museum, who is the influence of Hollywood, where does Hollywood come from, its origin, who are the directors you need to know to understand Hollywood. With Martin Scorsese, he is the guy. Like, he is one of the quintessential filmmakers of our time, and everything just so valuable to film, of especially of the past 50 years, is largely contributed to not just him, but he is one of the large names in it. So that's the idea of this show. I'm going to try angling some of our discussions to focus that, but I just wanted to announce the name now, way into the series, so my listeners will be extremely confused because they'll be like, you've been saying the name the whole time. But yeah, so I guess the question, Spencer, for you is, are you ready to jump into the movie we are doing today?
I've never been more ready. I'm going to dive in sort of into the choppy New England waters. It's going to be sort of a cool upside down shot as I swan dive over the camera. Let's do it.
All right. I guess you should I want you to take the lead. What movie are we doing today for our Scorsese exhibit, as you will?
This is Martin Scorsese's seminal 2010 psychological thriller, Shutter Island.
Shutter Island. That's the movie for today.
Yes, I'm so excited to be on. It's we might talk about this, but I think it was the first Scorsese I saw. Definitely the first one I saw in theaters, and it still
really
holds. Yeah, I was 15, so I wasn't going to see, I don't know, The Departed when I was 11. So this is it's always been very close to my heart. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, no, this one's going to be a really exciting one. One, because I contacted you a few months ago, basically asking you, like, which episode would you be interested in? I had you originally pitched for Wolf of Wall Street. I'm like, this sounds like a perfect fit. And you're like, let's do Shutter Island. And I'm like, sure thing, let's do it. This is a movie, I actually have not seen it. until this week. This was my first time viewing it, which has been kind of a reoccurring theme for this show. I've seen a lot of Scorsese's work, and I also just had a lot of just blind spots. Shutter Island was kind of one of them. Now, that may be kind of a lie because I think this was on cable when I was like kind of growing up. So I did see parts of this movie on like TNT, TBS growing up. I had never actually seen it all in full, and I had never actually seen it all continuously until this week. Like this was the first time where I
Mm.
sat down, beginning to end, watched this movie. Before we really dive into anything, Spencer, I guess the question that I just want to start with you is you kind of alluded to it earlier, but like this is your first exposure to Martin Scorsese. Did you know who Martin Scorsese was going into Shutter Island?
I did not. I don't even think I knew he directed it. Like, I think I just tried to. I mean, it's PG-13, so I don't think I had to sneak in, but I definitely like went with a couple friends of mine to like what I thought was going to be a horror movie. I was like, "Ooh, let's be bad. Let's go see a horror movie." And I don't think I had much frame of reference for who Scorsese was when I first saw it, which is funny because I think a lot of people today don't realize it's Scorsese. Like, it sort of had a bit of a legacy as like a forgotten film of his.
It's a movie that comes out. It's all very interesting, kind of what happens with this movie because this movie is originally slated to release 2009 in time for those year's Academy Awards. The award that eventually goes to The Hurt Locker and Glorious Bastards Up in the Air are also nominated that year, along with Avatar and a few other films that I'm sure I'm forgetting. But like, it was supposed to be an Oscar play movie in 2009. It ends up getting delayed. I believe it ends up coming out like February of 2010. I'm just confirming. Yeah, February 19th, 2010. It gets kind of at that time, Hollywood is specifically doing like Dumpuary for January and February, where they're just kind of throwing their movies that they have no clue what to do with and that they think are kind of going to be financial flops like in theaters. So it was a weird occasion for this movie to come out in 2010 of February and just be like, okay, it's a Martin Scorsese movie that is not being released in time for award seasons, and it's his follow up to his award winner, The Departed.
Mhm.
What's wrong with this movie? Essentially, I think that was kind of the narrative driving Shutter Island was what's wrong with this thing?
Now, I don't know if it would have gotten any nominations if they had released it around award season anyway. I mean, it's sort of it's a B movie, right? Like, it's not super Academy bait other than, I mean, it's got the names behind it, but I don't know, it feels more of a pot boiler than I think they usually go for. Especially since, Scorsese had recently, as you mentioned, done The Departed and like really established himself as like, okay, finally, like he has his Oscar. Let's see what he does. And he comes back with this like weird psychological thriller, mass market paperback adaptation.
Yeah, and this film is very genre. Like it is very much playing in the mystery thriller detective genre. Like this is maybe it would be fair to say, I'd have to think about this. I think it might be fair to say that this is the most genre film Scorsese has ever really directed in his filmography. I mean, this is true and true crime thriller in a pretty exciting way. Going into this movie, what you were expecting a horror film. Do you remember watching it for the first time? Like what that feeling was for you?
I was scared shitless. Like, it's funny, I still find this movie very, very scary, in a few different scenes, and I think it's a testament to, I don't know, how well it's constructed that I've rewatched it a bunch of times since, and like my heart still stops when he's having those flashbacks. And oh, I mean, the Dachau scene is like really, really harrowing.
Hmm.
Um, all of his dream sequences are really beautifully done in a sad and scary way. And it's something that doesn't get old for me, even on my, sixth or seventh time watching it.
Was this a movie for you when you're watching it for the first time and you get introduced to it? Does this now put Scorsese on a not necessarily pedestal, but does this make you aware of who he is after seeing Shutter Island? Like, are you now going like, okay, Martin Scorsese, I now need to kind of check out the rest?
I think that is sort of how it went, because I definitely went back and watched a lot of his classic films
Mm.
when I was in high school. Your Taxi Drivers, your Raging Bulls, things like that. Goodfellas I saw around then. So like all the classics, it opened me up to a little bit. And I don't remember how I reacted to those because those all feel very different from this.
Mhm.
They're just different genres, different vibes entirely.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting film to watch. One, without much context into this movie going into it, and two, just watching this movie as just straight up his follow up to The Departed, and also just watching this movie along with the other 25 he's directed, where it's just like you're into this movie and you're like, this is so stylistically, tonally, like I understand where Marty's coming from and in his direction of it. It's also a film that I'm watching. And I'm like, wow, this film's like really out there. It's really weird. It's like a really shockingly, I wouldn't even say necessarily cynical film from Marty, but it is certainly a film that when I'm watching, I'm like, wow, like these aren't characters types that Marty has ever really showed interest in following much throughout his career. The exciting thing for me with Shutter Island was just not knowing this film. Like this was one of the lucky ones where although I had heard of this film, I've heard people talk about it. I've now heard it kind of grow up in kind of the cult following, at least amongst Martin Scorsese. It's hard to say anything he has is really a cult film, but like with Shutter Island specifically, when I'm watching this movie, I was just like, I'm so glad I don't know what direction this movie is going.
100%. And I don't want to get on my hill that I'm going to die on just yet, but it has to do with that. I went on Letterboxd after I watched it yesterday. I don't know what I was expecting, but it had a lot more 5-star reviews than I think I was anticipating. Like people seem to connect with this in a way that like I sort of thought I was alone on. And I was gratified to see people both saying it's A, really good, and B, this is the other funny thing, that it feels like a Christopher Nolan film, which I disagree with. I don't think it does. I think it's too focused to be a Nolan film. I think it's too internal to be Nolan. But I get where they're coming from. It's twisty in a way that I don't think you expect from Scorsese.
This is a really kind of like I said, this is a really weird artifact of 2010 and just kind of the context of which all these actors exist in at this point. I mean, like I said, we already kind of hit on the Marty Scorsese piece of this. Like, this is a film that had a budget of 80 million and makes 300 million dollars, like worldwide. Like, that's a really big success for the studios. It's, or I should say, it's a very moderate, strong success. Like, that's probably overperformed, especially since Paramount put this film out in February. I think the Nolan comparison, if I had to guess, it's because Leo is in Inception the same year. Like Leo follows up, I want to say his film before this is Revolutionary Road with directed by Sam Mendes.
Ooh, that one people forgot. Goodness.
Yeah, I think that is his only film between this and then he does Shutter Island and he does Inception back to back. And there is an element of this movie that I wouldn't again call it a Nolan film. However, I will admit the performances, or I should say the performance that DiCaprio gives, and specifically that story and the kind of trauma of a dead wife.
Definitely.
I had to think of Inception while watching it just because of all the kind of outside like thoughts about this movie where I'm just like, yeah, that is a very similar beat to be playing in comparison to Inception, which, you know, has a different use of the dead wife trope, but I kind of understand where those comparisons are coming from. And then like there's other aspects of it where I agree with you. It's not really a Nolan film in any degree.
It's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it as being Nolan film until I saw it yesterday. And once I read it, I was like, oh, you know what? Sure. Yeah, we got Leo, we got the dead wife. Like I definitely see where they're coming from. But yeah, this would be trying to think where this would rank in my list of Nolan films, probably towards the top still.
Yeah, no, this is a really fun film to dive into. And we'll start diving into this movie real quick. But I think the aspect of this movie that I enjoy the most is the cast coming into this movie that is just like, we have a lot of just character actors in this film.
Oh yeah.
Just for one scene alone, kind of in and out. Just to read off this cast, we have the main stars, which is Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Ruffalo, Ben Kingsley. We then also have Max von Sydow, Michelle Williams as the wife, Emily Mortimer. Gosh, dang it, Emily Mortimer. You know what I'm trying to say. Patricia Clarkson, Jackie Earl Haley, which is kind of the
Oh
year
my
after
God, you're
he
right. He's
kind of
Noyce.
gets like,
Yeah.
yeah, he gets rediscovered in 2009 with his portrayal of Rorschach and Watchmen. Ted Levine from Monk is in this movie for like 2 scenes.
Scarier
And
than he is in Silence of the Lambs, in my opinion.
he is so good in this movie, and I
Yeah.
can't wait to get to him. And also just like another of those guys that I see in a movie like that, I'm just like, I instantly feel better about the movie.
You're gonna say John Carroll
Knowing
Lynch?
that I was actually still referring to Ted Levine, but I
Oh
was
yeah.
also going to tie that into John Carroll Lynch. Ted Levine is one of those like character actors that when you see them in, you're just like, all right, like this movie's just a little bit better because of the fact there were these two sitcom actors that I always have that relationship with. It's Ted Levine and it's the actor whose name I'm blanking on, but he plays Dr. Cox in Scrubs, and he's
Oh,
in The Rock.
oh my God. Yeah.
He's
He
in
was
he's in
I
Point Break.
I forget his
John
name too.
John McKinley. I'm looking it up.
John C. McKinley or something. It's he's
Yeah,
got
I
a
think
middle
that's it.
initial in there.
There is a let's see, Dr.
McGinley.
Cox McGinley. That's it. John C. McGinley. Like it's those two actors. It's Ted Levine, it's John in this. And then you got to the other one, which is John Carroll Lynch, which John Carroll Lynch has never played a particularly normal character in a film.
Fargo.
And what was that?
Fargo. I just watched that again last week.
Oh my God, he is in
yeah,
Fargo.
he's Marge's husband, and he is so sweet, so tender, and so normal. It's crazy.
God, I totally forgot he's Marge's husband in that movie. Like that's such a random one because like to me, like I'll just kind of get into this. I'll get on my John Carroll Lynch hill for a second. Like he is the scariest fucker I have ever seen in a movie. Zodiac
Yeah.
is the most unnerving performance I've ever seen from a serial killer type like performance. Like I get terrified when he is in the movie Zodiac. And he kind of brings that same energy into this movie. And that's my favorite aspect of this movie is everyone else in this movie in support of Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, it's no one's doing too much. Everyone is
Exactly.
like doing exactly what the part requires of them, which is what you need in a genre movie like this. You can't have anyone taking up too much air because then the whole thing is going to get thrown out of balance. But that is part of the reason why this movie works so well is because of all these people popping up for one scene, doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and then leaving again. Like, and it lets the plot itself be the major driver, which you need in a movie like this.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild performances from like across the board. And they use the kind of subversion of what you think Ben Kingsley and Max von Sydow are doing in this movie.
Mhm.
Ruffalo was playing not necessarily against type, but he's certainly playing a kind of different. He's weaponizing what we know of Mark Ruffalo to be as an actor in this movie. I guess before we really dive into this movie anymore, Spencer, I just want to kind of jump to your hill to die on.
My hill to die on for this movie is that this Shutter Island's twist is what a twist should be.
Mhm.
And I want to elaborate a little bit more on this and sort of compare, like draw a comparison between what I view as twists and what I view as reveals. Because I was thinking a lot about this recently, and especially since seeing Don't Worry, Darling. Did you see that?
Florence Pugh, the Olivia Wilde disaster from last year.
Yes, that's the
Okay,
one.
I did see that. I've only seen it once. I saw it in theaters. Weirdly enough, didn't hate it as much as everyone else did, but the twist is something.
I didn't hate it, and but that's the thing is that it's not a twist. Like by the definition that I'm like trying to break out on this podcast is that what that movie does, it sets up a world in which something is very, very clearly amiss.
Mhm.
And you're waiting the entire time to find out what it is. Right. And because you so clearly know, I mean, Olivia Wilde makes it very clear to the audience that something is wrong, and you're waiting to find out how, that because Florence Pugh is so far behind you, you're just waiting for her to catch up. And it makes it into a very frustrating experience. And that's why I will not call what happens in that movie a twist. I will call it a reveal.
Yeah, certainly. Because we kind of know a twist has to come in the movie.
Exactly. And when you're waiting for that other shoe to drop, that is what I view as a reveal. And people were talking about the twist, and I was like, it's not a twist when you're waiting for it. A twist should blindside you, right? You should have no idea it's coming. And the movie should work regardless of whether or not the twist is in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like Sixth Sense, for example, like the twist is so great at the end of that because it works. The movie is working on every level until that point. You don't even need the twist for it to be a great movie.
It's
And
sorry, keep going for it.
I was going to tie it back to Shutter Island in that this movie, when he gets to the island, you're like, okay, something's wrong, right? And then the deeper he starts to get down this rabbit hole, you start to realize what they're making it very clear is the actual conspiracy, right? It's got that MK Ultra, like mind control, ghost soldier thing going on. And he's like picking up clues that they don't want him to find out. And he's coming to realize what's really going on this island. And that alone would be a satisfying movie. It would be like a totally normal thriller. Then the twist happens for the last like 45 minutes, which there's another part of this movie I think is funny. The twist happens and you say, okay, everything that he was learning isn't real. This is a twist that I was not expecting because the movie doesn't really need for it to be there. It just exists only to stab you in the heart at the very end.
Sure. It's this weird conversation, twist and reveal, because I think you are hitting on something fundamental. Like a lot of movies are going for a twist. I think Don't Worry, Darling, I think the intention of that writing is that it's a twist ending. And in reality, it's actually reveal that is kind of disguised as a twist. In this movie, it is simply one that you really don't see coming in any way. And Scorsese does such a brilliant job in directing this that you kind of mentioned it. It's this Alice in Wonderland type effect with this movie where you're going down the rabbit hole. That's so much so that you kind of forget everything else that's happened before you get to that certain scene. Like when we get to the Ted Levine scene, and then we get to the Jackie Earle Haley scene, and then we get to John Carroll Lynch, or just these different, kind of moments that we get to with Leonardo DiCaprio's Teddy Daniels. Like you're in it, and then you've kind of forgot all the context that happens in the previous scenes to a degree. And then when it all ties together, you're like, oh, that's where it's going. And it's just I think the most important thing about a twist is it has to be very delicate. I think there are some directors / some writers who fully like twisted 360. And it's just like, does this actually make any narrative sense anymore? What Shutter Island does so brilliantly is that it's just the slightest bit of a twist. It's just like, it's enough that it's like, oh, wait, what's going on? But it doesn't like take away, like, it doesn't feel like out of this world that they've created. It's like, oh, okay, we've have enough of those pieces that it doesn't feel like it's such a huge reveal in the sense of like that the world has now changed type thing.
Totally. Yeah. And you're not waiting for it the whole time. I mean, on a rewatch, like a reason why I like rewatching it so much is because you do glean more things from it. Once you know the twist, you realize that, every single aspect of this performance that everyone's putting on for Leo has to work in 3 ways, right? It like has to work on the surface movie, and then it has to work for him to believe there's a conspiracy, and then it has to work at the level of the truth of this movie, which is that he's a patient here. And it's just one of those scripts even that fits together in all those ways that make it a really satisfying viewing experience.
Yeah, this was a weirdly like satisfying viewing experience for me, right? Like, because I'm watching it, I don't know where it's going. And by the time you get to the end, like, I don't know if you had this. I'm sure you were probably a little bit more engrossed with it the first time you saw it. I'm, seeing it at home on my computer. And I'm just like, the second act, it's not that it's losing me, but it's kind of coming in and out. Like, I'm just like, oh, I'm kind of following it. Like, it's going scene by scene. Like, I'm invested, but I'm not like fully engrossed. Like, it's holding my attention. And then the third act starts to reveal itself and where it's going. And I found myself getting more and more engrossed with the story and being like, wait a second, did I miss something that came earlier? And then so I started rewatching scenes from it today just to get a little bit more context of what was going in. And it's so easy to jump back into this movie post seeing the twist. Like, I also think that is kind of the key of a good twist, is that you actually want to revisit it when it's done.
Absolutely. There's that little scene at the beginning when Teddy is interviewing the lady who killed her husband with the axe,
Mm,
and he starts asking about Sheehan, the doctor,
mm.
and she's like, "Oh, he's nice." She gets really flustered. She's like, "Oh, he's nice. He's not hard on the eyes, if you know what I mean." And it cuts to Ruffalo, who's kind of like shifting uncomfortably, and like that's the kind of thing where you get an extra sort of bonus on the rewatch of like, oh, well, she's talking about him. Like,
Yeah.
it just makes that a little more fun.
This was, like I said, this was a really enjoyable movie for me. I guess let's kind of just dive into this movie, and I'm going to try to explain the kind of basic premise of this movie. This is going to be heavily spoilers, uh, but what this movie is it follows Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He plays Teddy Daniels, a U.S. Marshal, and he's going to this island that has like this psych hospital on it. He's going with his new partner, Chuck, played by Mark Ruffalo. They meet this senior psychiatrist in Ben Kingsley's Dr. John Cawley, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And basically, something's amiss. Something is weird about this island. They're there because of a disappearance of a woman named Rachel, who just all of a sudden just vanished off the island. And that's kind of the basic setup of this movie. This whole time, DiCaprio's character Teddy is having kind of these daydreams slash nightmares slash just like episodes where he's imagining his dead wife, uh, played by Michelle Williams. Her character's name is Dolores, who dies in a fire along with their kids. Like, that's kind of the basic premise. And DiCaprio's character of Teddy believes that the arsonist who set the fire is on this island in this hospital. That's kind of the broadest way to describe this movie in a way that's cohesive to start with, I think.
Yeah, that was solid.
Yeah, that's the hard thing where I'm just like, I'm trying to summarize something and I'm just like, there's so much, and like any little detail I miss out might make it a little confusing.
Yeah, no, that's we'll get to I know we talked a little bit about the twist and what Leo comes to believe is true about the island. But yeah, he runs into there's the fake Rachel and then the real Rachel, but then she's also the fake Rachel. So there's, twisty turny.
Yeah, no, this is I think when watching this movie for the first time, and I guess let's kind of just get into, I think the aspect that I enjoyed the most of this movie was the performances. The guy that just like kind of shocked me in this movie was Ruffalo. It's just, I think Ruffalo's such a charismatic, great actor, and he's been in I don't want to say movie prison for the past decade, but he has been in the Marvel machine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of so easy to forget how talented he is. That's not to, again, discredit what he does as Dr. Bruce Banner in the MCU. I actually quite like his performances in there. But the Chuck performance of this movie, I just found so engrossing. And specifically, the chemistry that he and Teddy have. It is kind of the first layer of this movie that totally keeps you blindsided by the twist that will come.
100%. I don't think it works without Ruffalo grounding you, and like keeping you feeling like you have some semblance, even while Leo's off having these migraines and these nightmares. You do have Ruffalo, because Ruffalo's always there when Leo comes out of these moments, and he's there to comfort him and say like, "You okay, boss?" So I think despite some only mediocre Boston accents, I think like their dynamic is really one of the keys of this movie.
And it allows DiCaprio to kind of go, I don't want to, going full crazy seems insensitive given the topic that we're discussing with this movie. DiCaprio goes for it in this movie in a really big way, in a kind of shocking way. Like, this is a very loud performance for DiCaprio in certain moments. I This is an unhinged performance, actually, like, quite honestly, from DiCaprio as Teddy Daniels. Like, I was just, the whole time I was just trying to follow what choices he's making as an actor. And I was so just not even engrossed by him, but I was just like, what inspired him to talk that way? What inspired him to move this way? What inspired him to just like, even some of the lines that he has where he's talking to Ben Kingsley's character, even the scenes where he gets seasick, it's just so kind of disconcerting. It's such an ugly performance from, you know, Hollywood's pretty boy.
It's a big performance.
It is.
Like it starts, obviously it starts with him on the ship, right? And he's like, pull it together, Teddy, pull it together, you know? And you're like, okay, cool. He's going for the period accent. He's going for, you know, big, he's wet for a lot of the movie, whether it's sweat or whether it's hurricane water or sea water. It's not a vain performance, which is nice. I don't know. It's big in a way that works for what's being asked of him.
Yeah, it's big and it works in the kind of crime noir 1930s detective feel to this movie. It's also a weird movie to watch with the context of that he is a U.S. Marshal, and they mention
a duly appointed federal marshal.
Yeah, and they mention J. Edgar multiple times throughout this movie, and then like the next year, DiCaprio plays Hoover in the
that's funny
biopic. So the whole time, like they keep mentioning it, and like that's a pretty funny coincidence in this movie. Uh, this whole like setup to this movie where we get to the island, I think this is where the horror is kind of really first established. Of just like everything's just slightly off. Everything is just a little bit weird in this movie where you get on this island and everything seems normal, but at the same time, nothing feels normal. Like it all feels very artificial when we get to
everyone's
Shutter
being
Island,
very helpful.
Yeah.
In a way that, yeah, on the rewatch, you're like, it's a little bit mysterious. It's a little bit suspicious that these people are pulling out all these stops to like make this investigation happen. There's no one who's obviously presenting an obstacle in the first third, which sort of raises some red flags.
Yeah, it does. It gives this world, and no, you said artificial. I would even go as far as to say like it gives it this kind of sense of dream state. Like when I was watching this, like you really feel the kind of in and out of Leonardo DiCaprio's psychoses in this movie, where he'll just jump from in and out. And when he goes into like one of his dream sequences where he's imagining Michelle Williams, as most of us do while we're dreaming as well, I admittedly, like I too dream of Michelle Williams. The aspect of this movie is it's so well blended together that you are just like, what is going on with this guy? Like it's such a, I don't even know what I'm trying to fully say here, but with this scenes like this, the first time it happens, right? When we get the Michelle Williams flashback, it's so quick and it's so sudden and it's so edited and lit differently that you're just like, this feels like a different world, a different time. And it also just, that was the scariest part of this movie to me, where it's just like, something's weird in this dream.
That one's cut in a very specific way too. There's one like really odd cut that I noticed on this watch where her back is facing, she's like facing out the window and Leo's saying something behind her, and it cuts and all of a sudden she's facing him saying her line. And so, yeah, it definitely gets across the nightmare aspect of things. And there's some of these flashbacks, I guess, I'm using scare quotes because one of them is just a memory, but it's seamlessly intercut as soon as Leo starts hearing the Mahler piece, the quartet for piano and strings in A minor, I think it's called. And that's the one that plays when he first meets Max von Sydow. And he has that memory of entering the concentration camp and seeing the dying Nazi on the ground. And that's not an official nightmare. It's not an official flashback. He's just remembering. And so it creates this, like you were saying, this dream state of what's a memory that he's consciously remembering. What is he subconsciously remembering? When is he asleep? When is he awake? It's an appropriate, it keeps you on your toes for something that's set in a mental hospital. It works.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a brilliant setting for horror is to be in a mental hospital where the idea is this is psychological horror and the horror of not being able to escape your mind is very prevalent in this movie. I will say the Ben Kingsley performance in this movie is masterfully done. Like it's such a subversion of expectations because the exact second he walks on screen, I'm like, this guy's the villain. Like this is like
Hmm.
whatever the tie into this movie at the end is going to be, whatever happens, Ben Kingsley's Dr. John Cawley is in on it and he's a bad guy.
Because he's
Like
too helpful.
exactly.
He's not sinister. And you're like, okay, he's hiding something. What he's hiding is being a really nice guy. He just
Mhm.
wants to help Leo out. That's my favorite part of this, is that they've he creates this whole elaborate fiction in spite of the fact that they're really just there to try to break him out of this.
Yeah, and it works so well because we have a relationship with Ben Kingsley as an actor where you're just like, oh, this guy's a sick fuck. What's he gonna do? Like this
Mm-hmm.
mean guy. Like again, not to say that again, Kingsley is, he played Gandhi. Like this is a guy who can play very soft. But when he's in a movie like this doing that type of performance, you are totally in the belief that this guy is villainous in some way. And it's the interesting twist because then you get other character actors in this movie. Like I think the idea to have Jackie Earl Haley, to have Ted Levine, who you already mentioned, like was in Silence of the Lambs, and to have John Carroll Lynch, all three of them in there. That's Zodiac, that's Silence of the Lambs, that's Rorschach, and everything else Jackie Earl Haley did, which I'm blanking on some of the other movies that he's done. But like I mean, he played Freddy Krueger the same year in 2010. Like
Oh, I
there
forgot he
is
did Freddy Krueger. Yeah.
I always forget that he's the Freddy Krueger in this that 2010 Nightmare remake. All of that is just there because you're like, okay, yeah, we know who the bad guys in this movie are clearly. Like we know who the creeps are.
Yeah, totally. Um, I want to talk about the soundtrack a little bit too.
Yeah, go
Apologies,
for
we're
it.
gonna get to that later, but like they didn't make, I was reading a little bit about this. They didn't commission a score for this. They just picked classical songs that they thought would work in all of these. And there are so many that I go back to. There's the Mahler piece in like the Nazi suicide,
Mhm.
attempted suicide flashback. There's the John Cage that like atonal piano piece that's like just
Mhm.
does that sort of spread throughout. And that's when there's that horrifying moment when he's walking by the frozen pile of corpses and he looks back and it's Michelle Williams. I'm shivering just thinking about it, and it's his dead wife and daughter. Like that is a really, really scary moment for me and probably for you.
Yeah, no,
um
it's Williams is something else in this movie.
yeah.
And this is an actress who we revere her as one of our great actresses right now. Like, I think probably on most people's radar as like in contention for the best living actress right now. The fun thing that I love about Michelle Williams is, and I always think it is the key to our best actors, is they can go big and loud in a way that feels tonally correct for the movie and also conveys the seriousness of the movie while also being just like the slight bit comedic. Michelle Williams is just, I mean, unhinged in this movie performance wise. Like, I mean, she is simply like just so maximalist in this film. Like,
Mhm.
the same way Scorsese is a maximalist filmmaker, she is doing that in spades. And like, I mean, her level is 10 at this movie at all time. And in
Yeah,
the final
even
scene,
when
she's
she
at like 12.
yeah, even when she disintegrates into ash, she's still giving a 10. She has also the funniest reaction shot in this movie, which is after Leo, he's putting the tie into the car and he says, I love this thing because you got it for me.
Mhm.
But the truth is, it's one ugly fucking tie. And
Yeah.
it cuts back to her, and like his hallucination of her is kind of like it cocks her head. She's a little bit hurt, but it's
Yeah.
just such a funny moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of these just like small little moments between the characters uh that I love. And then so like kind of getting more into this movie as we dive in, things aren't as it seems. We get the reveal that Rachel comes back to the island. They find her. Rachel is this character who admits to drowning her children, and believes Teddy to be her husband. Like, we're getting this whole moment. We're starting to learn a little bit more. And then this whole, I'm skipping over a bunch, and you can kind of just jump in for scenes or after I'm done. But with this, but it's just like, we find out that Rachel is actually not Rachel. She's somebody in this hospital who's pretending to be Rachel. And then we get to this Patricia Clarkson, Rachel 2 situation in a cave. I know I just jumped through a lot of the movie, but let's kind of just talk about those scenes kind of in between, which I want to say, trying to confirm it in my head. This is the issue of not taking notes and just like going through the movie in your head. I want to say we get the Ted Levine scene before we get to the cave.
I think it comes right after. I think he climbs up and then sees Ted Levine.
Oh, you're right. He gets out of the cave and then they're like, oh, it's the middle of the storm or whatever, right? Like, we gotta take you back to the island.
Something like that. Yeah, that Ted Levine scene is so good. That's as philosophical as this movie gets. It's a pretty inscrutable conversation. They're talking about violence and the purpose, why God put violence in the world, and who's a violent man, and at what point will we, revert to just being beasts. It's interesting because Ted Levine's character, like, everyone knows who Leo actually is, right? They know he's a violent patient on this island, and there are some fun scenes watching it on the rewatch when you realize that, like, why everyone's reacting the way they are around him. But it's interesting. It's almost like Leo is a challenge that the warden Ted Levine has to overcome. Like, he likes knowing that this guy's out there on the prowl, and like,
Yeah,
it's almost like a most dangerous game kind of thing.
there's this moment that he has, and it's I forget exactly the phrasing that he has to Leo's Teddy character. Is it feels like he's trying to break him, like he wants to kid him out. He's like kind of wants to prove his point, like, you're the most violent man ever. Like, there is this aspect of this where it does really feel like Ted Levine, as the warden, is goading him on, like, come on, like, show me what you really are about, like, show me who I know you to be.
Yeah, that scene ends with him saying, if I were to sink my teeth into your eyeball, could you stop me from going blind? Could you stop me from making you go blind? Leo says, just, try it and find out. And Ted Levine goes, that's the spirit, like, claps him on the shoulder. It's great. Maybe he sees a little something of himself in him. It's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a really unnerving scene. And I guess we should get to Patricia Clarkson, because I kind of yada over her in this movie. She might have the most difficult role in this movie, in the sense that she has to kind of be the exposition dump for giving the context of the movie. And she also has to work to the film's reveal, in the sense that, like, and spoilers alert, Rachel Chu isn't alive. She's not a real person. She's a figment of imagination. So the fact that she's playing it first as Rachel Chu for the first half of the movie, kind of explaining to Leonardo DiCaprio what's going on, and she also subconsciously has to play that performance to then get to the end where it's like, oh, actually, Daniel's character is insane. Like, to be able to do both of those in this performance is a really tough ask. And it is this kind of traditional one and done scene. She comes into the movie for like 5 minutes. She just delivers the exposition, which this movie desperately needs. Like, it needs it needs this story dump to happen, like, right here.
It's not just exposition either. It's the reveal, right? It's what you've been waiting for the shoe to drop. Finally, she's telling you what you and Leo are both coming to believe is true. And you're like, oh, that's what's really going on. That's the truth. But it's interesting because she's just feeding him what he wants to, literally what his subconscious is telling him is true.
Yeah, no, it's a really impressive performance, because this is what completely, I wouldn't say relaxes you as the audience, but you're like, okay, I'm in on this movie's twist.
I
Like,
know what's
I
going on
now
now.
get what's going on. I have the full context to understand everything weird going on. And then you start seeing the scenes, and it's just like, oh, well, he did this at the beginning of the scene, like where, or in the beginning of the movie where he smokes a cigarette or he takes this drink or food, whatever it is. And you're like, oh, those are the moments. And that's like, it's the whole Clarkson moment in this where it's just like, oh, okay, it is truly the conspiracy come to life. And then like, we then get, which I think is my favorite scene in the movie, is the Jackie Earl Haley scene in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
This scene is exceptional. If there was a best 5 minute or less performance, I'm trying to think how I'm trying to phrase this. If there was an Oscar for actor who's in a movie for less than 5 minutes and steals the movie, I think this would have to go to Jackie Earl Haley. Like that, you're like, I just don't know who else delivers a performance like this in any movie.
Mm. I his performance, it's really good. It's creepy in a way that like it doesn't stick with me for some reason. And maybe that's because it comes in the middle of this extended Ward C sequence in which
Mm.
your nerves are so jangled by this point. You get to him and you're waiting for him to explode or to prove that, you know, something else is going on. But it's a more subtle performance than you're expecting.
It's such a Jackie Earl Haley is truly one of the great, like, scariest looking actors we have.
Oh yeah,
And
I mean that's
it
why they
is
cast him.
this, yeah, it is that moment where you're just like, this man is so deeply violent and inherently psychopath that like he reads a psychopath in every movie he plays, even in the most normal performances, even when he's just like kind of playing a comedic villain in like The Tick. The guy reads at full level sociopath, psychopath, disturbing level.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole scene, you're just kind of waiting for him to hit that note, right? Like you're sitting there and you're like, it is going to crescendo into something really inherently violent. And he
Right.
never gives you that release. And it's so toned back for him as an actor that it's far creepier. It is that the kind of thing where it's just like, you want him to be angrier because it's like, okay, it's again this reveal of who this person is, where you're just like sitting there and you're like, okay, at least now I understand who he is.
Totally. And then once you find out that, you know, it's actually Leo who was the violent one and who, you know, gave Jackie Earl Haley those scars, right, that he shows off on his cheeks, like you realize you're like, oh, okay, yep, we've been following, you know, the monster the whole time.
Mhm. It's, yeah, I know. It's this. I'm trying to think of like the moments in this film where I start like really feeling unnerved. And it is this Jackie Earl Haley scene, I think, is the one that I find the most fascinating to watch back. And then as we get there, we kind of then leads gradually into the third act of this movie, which is the big twist, which is essentially Edward Teddy Daniels is a person who shot his wife a few years ago, and that he is actually a patient at this island. And they've kind of created this whole simulation to try to basically heal him.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the most, I think Ben Kingsley says it's like the most elaborate psychological ploy ever put on to role play along with his delusional fantasy in the hopes of, you know, breaking him out of it.
It's
Um,
Have you seen The Good Place?
I have.
It's that is essentially what the Shutter Island twist in this movie is. It's like, oh, you're actually the patient, and this is you're the psychopath.
It's more Truman Show too. Like
It is a little
that's the whole
Truman.
thing. Everyone else knows who this guy is, and he doesn't, you know, he's not playing the person he thinks he is.
Watching this twist for the first time, do you remember how you felt? Like, did this make you feel alive? Is what I'm asking.
For sure. I love everything about this third act. I love that it is so long. Like once he gets to the
So
lighthouse, there's like a full third of the movie to get to that is this denouement. It's so good.
I calculated the moment that it happens, and the lighthouse. When he gets to the lighthouse, we still have about 42 minutes left in a 2 hour and 18-minute movie.
Oh, I love it. It's so indulgent. But I love a big reveal, you know? And not only that, when Kingsley breaks out the whiteboard with
Mm.
the anagrams just so neatly laid out. I love that. That's some Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets shit. I love a climactic anagram. Give me
Mhm.
that wordplay.
Yeah, no, it's so good, and it's like so comedically funny. Like you can't
It's
help but
so
laugh.
funny. The whole scene gets started off on this funny note because Leo walks in and Ben Kingsley goes, "Why you all wet, baby?" It's a crazy, which you've only heard in the flashback. It's such a crazy way to open the scene. You're like, okay, something's about to go down, and I'm fully in.
Yeah, no, it's such a wild third act because again, the twist of this movie is essentially like it's kind of comedic in its sensibilities. It's like, oh no, you're kind of being like it's an elaborate prank. And like Leonardo DiCaprio was learning it and learning it the same way like someone on Pranked would. They're like, wait, no, this isn't happening. And then they're like, think about this. And then think about that. And then he's like having those like moments where he goes back and he's like, oh, like he kind of has like DiCaprio has this like almost juvenile energy at times in this scene where it's just like it's so like boyish and he's so charming in it, and he's also just kind of like lost. Like it is
So
someone who's
lost. Yeah.
like I think my favorite scene is in this whole montage where he just like grabs the gun and he's like, no, this isn't real, like I have a gun and I'm gonna shoot you and this gun says my name or whatever.
And then he snaps it in half because it's made of plastic.
Yeah.
It's so convenient that so his real name is Andrew Latis, right? It's so convenient that those letters perfectly match up to make a name that is more traditional than Andrew Latis.
Mm,
Edwards is just such a more common name than I've never heard of the name Latis before. I
exactly.
love that it works that way and not the other way around. Because if you had to make up a name Latis, you'd be like, yeah, subconscious is working pretty hard to make up that name. But nope, it just turned Latis into Edwards. Why not?
Oh yeah, you know they came up with the name Edward Teddy Daniels first.
Yep.
And
You
then
can't.
they're like, what can we make? And they're like, we got Andrew. And
Yeah.
like we have an L and an A together. We have an I and an S, and we have two D's.
You're like,
And then they're
shit, what are
like,
we gonna
so
do with
like, do we
this?
give him a middle name? And they're like, let's just kind of mash it all together.
And we got Rachel Solando and Dolores Chanel. Dolores Chanel works. Solando, not it's could plausibly be a name, but it's no name I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it is the Harry Potter Chambers of Secrets moment where it's just like Tom Marvolo riddle, and it's just like I am Lord Voldemort, and it's like, well, the I am part is
The I
also
am
a
bumps a
weird
little
part.
bit. Yeah. How come it's not I am Tom Riddle? It's getting a little sweaty here.
Yeah, no, it is such a fun reveal. And then like this movie like just doesn't stop. Like it is going full fast and full furious at this final third act where it is just straight up like we're going to reveal this and then we're going to actually show what's happened and then we're going to have the final scene. But it's like again like this movie is so indulgent in itself in such a good way where this sequence between Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Ruffalo, Ben Kingsley lasts about 20 minutes. And then we get a 15-minute sequence to basically explain what we already kind of know at this point, which is that Leonardo DiCaprio killed Michelle Williams.
I love that scene though. It's beautiful. I learned researching this a little bit that cabin scene was shot in Massachusetts, where I'm from. A lot of this movie was shot in like southeastern Mass, which is right around where I grew up. I've been to Medfield State Hospital, which is where they shot some of the exterior scenes, which is this old like a now defunct psychiatric hospital that is you can sort of like my dad took me when I was a kid. Like we like went to just like walk around the old ruins.
Mm.
Anyway, I love that cabin scene because it's this, Massachusetts forest on a lake kind of situation. Um, and it's so beautiful and sad in a way that a lot of these flashbacks in this movie are.
Yeah, no, it's such a bizarre sequence that it's unfolding like everything about it because now you know as the audience what is unfolding and you get to the sequence and you're like what is not like the pacing of it is so deliberate. Like one of my favorite like scenes in it, and it's like a darkly comedic scene, and I don't even know if it's intentional. It's the scene where Leonardo DiCaprio is Andrew is swimming in to like save his children,
Mm-hmm.
and he finds the daughter, and like he's just holding her body, and he waits like a full minute more to actually then start going for the son.
Hmm.
I don't know why it's such a bizarrely funny scene to me. It's such a really sad, tragic scene. And yet at the same time, I'm like, this doesn't even feel normal.
It's partially because there's no score, I think. That's a silent scene, which is like a really deliberate choice, I think. In my memory, the Max Richter on the Nature of Daylight was playing during that scene, but it doesn't. I
Mm,
remembered it playing, but it only plays during the first Michelle Williams flashback,
yeah.
when she's, soaking wet and everything, which is obviously such a beautiful piece. It's used in so much, probably a little too much than it should be, but it's a silent scene when he's pulling the kids out of the water. It's funny. You ever heard the phrase or the maxim that anything close up is tragedy and anything from far away is comedy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like it almost does a little bit of that. Like there's some wide shots of him with these kids laying them out on the lawn, and it's so tragic as to be like totally unreal.
Yeah, no, it feels so it is the whole thing of this movie is like its tone is it feels so dreamlike, and it feels like such a nightmare that it's just like it's almost comedic how over the top nightmarish it is. Like where it's just like all this kind of happens in the span of like 5 to 10 minutes. It's also just like this brilliant again, it's a very physical performance from DiCaprio, and I think DiCaprio does his best work in this final like 15-20 minutes of the movie. But it's even like just the weird way that he just swims. Like he's just kind of like paddling really big.
I think I was actually trying to like figure out how deep the pond was on this rewatch of like because
Same
he's
question.
standing up, it's only like waist deep for him, but he has to get out there faster. He needs to be swimming it. So like he like sort of throws himself in and he's like half swimming, half
It's more like
walking.
this. Like
No,
he's
it's a
kind of
mess.
like
It's a
almost
mess.
looks like he's grabbing the water and pulling himself
Which is funny
forward.
because we know he's a strong swimmer because he swims out to the lighthouse in
Mm.
like choppy water. So it's funny that he's in this lake and he's, trying to get there fast and not doing such a good job of it.
Yeah, no, it's a like I said, it's a really wild sequence, and it's a wild sequence to then just see Michelle Williams in the background
Oh,
reacting to all
yeah.
of this. Like it is such a and then we get to this kind of the big reveal, not reveal of this movie, but it's like we finally get what has been hinted at in this third act, which is Andrew just shoots her like
Hmm.
in a really cold execution way. And it's very startling. Like, even though you know it's about to happen, it's a very startling scene. And it's just like the emotion of it feels so tender and real.
Yeah, she asks to be let go, right? There's some line where she's like, set me free. And he
Mm.
does that. And then he gets put in, Ashcliff for 2 years. I don't know. I mean, it's really deeply tragic, in a way that sticks with you.
Yeah, no. And so I have a question because this is when we get to the end of this movie. You've seen it now more times than I have for sure. Was there ever a part of you that doesn't fully even believe the ending? Like, there's a part of me when I'm watching this, when we finally get to the final scene of this movie with the kind of the big line from this movie that Andrew gives to Chuck. Like there's this moment of it's just like, is this is any of this actually real in the sense of like, are they actually still lying to him? And like they've now made up this thing? Or do you actually truly believe Andrew is everything that we've learned about him?
I do believe what this movie is telling us is the truth by the very end. I think it would be like rudely convoluted to have it not be,
Mm,
but I more than that, I just choose to believe it. Like I like the note that it ends on. I think it makes sense thematically given the arc of this movie, what we've come to learn about this character. Um, yeah, I love the note that it ends on when you're like, oh shit, he's he's back, but at the
mm.
same time, he can't live with himself.
Yeah, it's this the final line that he gives is to live as a monster or to die as a good man. And then like, he goes off to get lobotomized. And I think the moment that for me when I was watching it is it's a very stark decision, but it's Mark Ruffalo yelling out Teddy instead of
Yep.
yelling out the name Andrew. Where that was the moment where I'm like, did the facade just slip for a second? Or is this a case of he's trying to get him back into the fakeness of his world again? Like get him back into a figment of his imagination.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think that I mean, because he doesn't react, right? Leo doesn't react when Mark Ruffalo calls Teddy after him.
Mm.
And, if he really were back in his delusion, he would, right? That's, and, I'm sure there are ways you can rationalize that not being the case, but I choose to believe it just based on the overall narrative of this movie. I like the
And I
ending.
think you're right, because that is the interpretation that I have by the end of this movie. It is just, and I also researched about this because this is based on a novel, and the novel is far more clear cut on its ending, where it is like that is the ending that we are supposed to believe.
Interesting.
So like that was the element where I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, but it's certainly I think it's just kind of the way we view movies now, where it's just like it feels like this movie should have a little bit more of an open endingness to it, where it's just kind of as all this style of filmmaking specifically typically has like this open-ended question to it. This one has a very finite ending, and in that it's like, wait, but is that it? Like, are we truly to believe that?
Mm-hmm. It's
And that was
it's a neater morality play than I think maybe we're expecting. Did you see Nightmare Alley, the Guillermo del Toro came out a
yeah,
couple of years ago?
incredible movie.
Yeah, I liked it. But the way that one ends in this like full circle, like Bradley Cooper is back to being, the lowest point that he started from.
Mm.
That it was this sort of like 19, because that was based off of a novel from like the 30s or 40s, or which was also made into a film then. But
Yeah.
that worked in a very sort of old like film noir type of like, crime and punishment kind of way. And that's almost what this does a little bit too.
Oh, it's certainly playing off that idea. Like it very much does come to the conclusion of this film and what it says about its characters. Is there anything that we missed before we kind of wrap up this conversation? Is there any scenes that I missed that you wanted to talk about, or any ideas or thoughts you had on this?
Um, no, not beyond just the score, but yeah, just go back and listen to that shit. That is so good. We got
Yeah,
Max
it's
Richter, we got the John Cage, we have Mahler. Um, that the short sort of Shutter Island theme of those three low notes, bomb, bomb, bomb. Like, there's a lot in there that is just it really sticks with me.
I guess there's two more points that I should mention before we uh end this. It's Elias Koteas, I believe is how you pronounce the actor's name, the person who plays Lattice, the fictional arsonist that Teddy invented, who he believes killed Dolores. That moment where they have that confrontation, it kind of capstones the end of the first arc, where DiCaprio just starts going at him. That's one of my favorite just moments in this film. And the last one that I really wanted to talk about was that final shot that DiCaprio gives to Ruffalo. Like it's a incredible moment in DiCaprio's career. Just the ability to convey everything with just one final glance. It's a very movie star glance, where it's just like I see the entire soul behind the eyes.
Yes, I noticed this time he's looking down for that delivery, and then he blinks and looks up and makes eye contact with Mark Ruffalo right before standing up and walking with the orderlies. And I was like, "You're gonna make eye contact. You're gonna look up," and he did right at the right moment. Sorry if you can hear that. There's a very loud sort of bass car going on. All right, just ended.
I had somebody, totally side note, but I was at McDonald's a few days ago, maybe like a week ago, and I was next to someone who had like a huge Hummer, bass fully blasting, like the whole McDonald's shaking. And he's just staring at me the whole time. And then when I try ordering it, he boosted even louder. And it's just like glaring at me.
That's
And
so
like,
funny. This
this
guy's
happened.
back. Can you hear him?
No, I can't hear him at
Okay,
all.
good. I'm glad. It's very distracting for me. My apartment's shaking.
Well, with that all said, that is our conversation on the film Shutter Island. And I have 3 questions for you, Spencer, before we leave this. My first question is actually kind of 2 questions tied into one. It is the question of Martin Scorsese himself. He's been a director who's now been working for 7 decades in Hollywood. So my question for you is, who is an actor who has passed away that you would have loved to have seen work with Marty Scorsese? And the second part is, who is an actor still alive that could get the chance to work with Martin Scorsese that's never worked with Martin that you would have loved to have seen or would
Yeah.
love to see?
I'm glad that I have 2 answers for the first part of this question, because I don't think you mentioned it was an actor before. So I have an actor and I have someone else. But the actor who has passed away is James Gandolfini, who, like,
He's mine.
he's yours?
He's
Oh,
legitimately mine. I
I
wrote
mean,
him down as Gandolfini because I always try to theme it with the movie. Like, who's
Mhm.
someone who could have been in this movie and would have worked? And Gandolfini was my actor.
Yeah. He's not to give us too much credit. I feel like it's sort of an obvious pick just because of the whole mob thing.
Yeah.
But like he could fit in any number of Scorsese movies, and even the ones, even Scorsese's softer side, like Gandolfini has that tender side to him that I think would have worked really well in the Scorsese movies that you don't think about as being his big mafia ones.
It's the fact of this guy can play The Sopranos and he can play Enough Said.
Oh God, I love Enough Said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. It's so good.
R.I.P. to Jim. But the other person who has passed away is Ennio Morricone, who's another proud Italo-American who I think I don't know, would have really done some cool stuff for some of Scorsese's things, like this new one, Killers of the Flower Moon, like just sort of a historical epic. Like that's where Morricone comes alive, and I think that would have been really cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a really good answer. Killers of the Flower Moon does feature my boy Jesse Plemons, though, so pretty
Oh,
excited.
good. Fat Damon himself.
Yeah, I really
Uh,
like that. So who's your actor who's alive?
the one who's alive, last time I checked, is Jennifer Lawrence.
She is alive.
She is alive. Good for her.
Now, do know we will release this episode between September and October, so there is a month and a half. So
Keep an eye on
here's crossing
Jennifer
our fingers
Lawrence.
that she
Yeah.
is alive, that she is healthy.
And also have to, the worst outcome will that be that we have to re-record this.
Oh, this would be like horrible if she actually like passed away and we were like,
We made it happen. Yeah.
this
She
this whole section would never make it to air.
I don't know. She's so talented and has a wide range that I think also plays well with Scorsese's range. She's going to be able to do the brash. I'm thinking of her performance in American Hustle. Like she can do like the brash, like mafia wife kind of thing. And she can also do like the more tender, subdued stuff, I think, really well.
I said Jennifer Lawrence for a previous episode, and the reason I had said it is because of the film No Hard Feelings. And I think we were talking about The Departed when I answered her. And the reason I answered her is because, yeah, you could take the Mark Wahlberg character in The Departed, make that a female, and Jennifer Lawrence could do that part.
Totally, yeah.
Like she's so good when she's brash.
Yeah, that it is a strength of hers. But I mean, she could play the Leo role in Shutter Island. It would be fine. Gender swap Shutter Island, like she can totally do that.
Who plays Ben Kingsley in the gender swap?
Margot Martindale.
Okay, I was gonna go Tilda Swinton.
She's the Max von Sydow.
That's a really good pick.
Yeah, European, like just vaguely really icy.
Looking...
I think Max von Sydow is so good in this also because you so suspect him to be a Nazi, and it turns out he's just a nice old man.
Yeah, no, Max is another of those actors who just like he looks evil.
Yeah. And when Leo calls him out, he's like, "You hit those consonants a little hard, doctor." You're like, "Oh shit, yeah, you okay? You're onto him."
My answer for actor who is still alive, and I was like, I actually researched it to confirm that he's never been in a movie with Scorsese. I went Gary Oldman.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, totally, he'd fit right in.
The freak amongst freaks. Like, if there was any movie, like, I think there are 2 actors who are at their strongest when they're just playing absolute lunatics. and it's my boy Gary Oldman, and it's Michael Rooker. I just saw.
Sure.
I was rewatching. Oh God, have you seen the movie? It's Michael Rooker, like '92. Confessions of a Serial Killer. Is that the name of the movie?
Have not seen.
Okay, it's a disturbing movie, and Rooker's off is like raucous. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just the Gary Oldman plays best when he's in a movie for a few scenes, like he is in Oppenheimer or he is in JFK. He just comes in and he's just like crazy for like 5 minutes, and then he just like leaves.
Yeah, no, he's great in J. I didn't recognize him in JFK for a while. Is Michael Rooker also in that?
Michael Rooker is in JFK. He's like the
Yeah,
most normal character in JFK, who's like, you
yeah.
can't indict LBJ for murder.
I love JFK. I watched it for the first time a few months ago, and I went on a hike with some friends like the next week, and I just fully sold them on, like, it fully converted me, and I tried to convert my friends extremely hard, and I think it mostly worked.
It is one of those movies where like I rewatch it, and every time I'm like, yep, Oliver Stone hits it. Like he understands it. LBJ is a killer.
Yeah, 100%.
Like I'm just fully on board. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, but I'm totally in on the conspiracy theory that LBJ did it.
Oh, exactly the same for me. Yeah, I'm not one to like fly off the handle about stuff like this, but I was like, oh no, like this. I mean, this is real. Like there was a second and probably a third shooter.
Yeah, no, I'm just like, there has to have been like multiple guns, like Joe Pesci's just screaming, the shooters don't even know who did it. Yeah, one
Great.
last favorite fact about that movie, JFK, which is completely off topic. Tommy Lee Jones, like he insisted that he was painted gold.
No,
The sex scene. Yeah, no, he was like, I need to be painted gold.
like it's not in the script.
Yeah, no,
Just
it
like,
was
you know,
not
it'd be
in the
really good
script.
for my
He's like,
character
this
right here.
character needs to be painted gold for this gay, like orgy or whatever it is in that scene.
That's awesome. He's great in that too.
Legendary performance. All right, with that said, top five, Spencer, or Marty Scorsese.
I think so. There are the ones that I've seen a bunch, which are Goodfellas and Taxi Driver, which are at the very top for me. Like I could not in good faith say Shutter Island is better than those movies, but I will put it below those two just in terms of my personal picks. And then after that, there are a bunch of movies that I have seen once and have not seen again, and like need to do a rewatch to like fully, I don't know, engage with. And that's like Raging Bull. It's The King of Comedy. It's Wolf of Wall Street. The Irishman. I loved all these when I first saw them, but I have not seen them again, and so I don't feel right ranking between them.
Yeah, no. So let's see. So if you had to pick, because you have to pick two, I'm gonna hold you to this. So it seems like you have Taxi Driver, you have Goodfellas, you have Shutter Island.
Okay, let's do. Oh God, Silence was good. Fucking
Silence
The Aviator. Gangs in New York is so much fun. Yeah, fuck it, Gangs in New York. And then
the Day-Lewis performance is incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on, you can't argue with that. And then let's do. I couldn't even get through King of Comedy. I can't put it. I couldn't get through it.
No, I love King of Comedy.
It's great, but it was too cringy. I need to give it a second shot, but I was like, I don't want to spend more time with Richard Pupkin. So my last one.
You're New York,
Hugo.
York guy. I can feel it. Hugo. Love that pick.
Give me that. I actually really like that movie.
It's a good movie.
It is not in his top 5. I'm just being insouciant, but I did like it.
Perfect. Well, I will be revealing my list soon. We'll be coming up to the Irishman episode real soon with Keith Phipps, where I will be revealing my top 5. But with that all said, thank you all for listening to this episode. Spencer, where can the people find you?
I am so off social media these days. I should have prepared something. I'm on Twitter at Roomy Crisis. You can watch my latest.
Sorry, real quick.
Film.
It's X.
Oh God, X. Yeah. Find me on x.com. I'm at Roomy Crisis.
We can repost you. It's all good.
Oh God. Yeah. I noticed that yesterday. Don't get me started. You can also check out my latest short film called Tagine on Vimeo, which was really fun. So go check that out. It's only 7 minutes.
Yeah. And you can find Spencer back when he and I start the JFK Oliver Stone podcast where we're just going to go 8 hours deep on JFK.
We watch it every week and we discuss it on mic and get progressively more and more animated.
Does this end with us joining QAnon for the season now?
If there was QAnon for JFK, I'm there.
Did Oliver Stone invent QAnon?
He's, I think, a lunatic, which sort of puts a dent in our like, this movie is the truth kind of attitude. But at the same time, it's a good movie.
It's such a good movie. You'll see us and we'll have our whiteboards full and we'll be doing anagrams and all that. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be 8 hours long. We'll be doing it for the Oliver Stone series.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ben.
Thank you for joining me today, Spencer. We will be back tomorrow. I want to say tomorrow. I don't think we're releasing this episode on Friday, but I'll have to confirm that. We'll be back for our next episode. We're talking Hugo with my former co-host of my podcast, Ben and Brand See a Movie. Branson and Delicata will be joining me for Hugo. So thank you all for listening. Take care and bye-bye.